Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LJL OU podcast, season 2, episode 23. I think we're almost up to 60 now initialized. Like, this is kind of
that's getting crazy.
Getting nutty. Welcome, everybody, to the podcast. This is the only podcast where we talk all things LJL related. What is that? Is the competitive League of Legends over in Japan. But we also cover all of those other things. I am your co-host with the most, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi. I got my MaskedSwan on the internet, and my constant, as always, brother and companion, except brother from another mother, because he's got an actual biological brother that just isn't here this week.
Today. No, he's not.
Initialize. Welcome, sir.
Pleasure to be here. I'm quite excited to be kind of living vicariously the last weekend's game, because I was actually not around for once. So I kind of like tuned in part way through and see some of the absolutely nutty things that were happening. Because what did I miss? I'm here to be excited.
What were you doing?
What
were you doing?
My first ever in-person LAN event back home in Nottingham. So I was doing the British Esports Association finals with a couple dear friends and great casters, namely Milky Cereal and Temporal as well, who absolutely smurfed it. Honestly, it was a really, really cool event. Yeah, gonna meet some amazing
was there as well, another LJL alumni.
Yeah, exactly. There was a few. I thought we saw Rye from Resolve, and I think one of the XL managers was there as well. So yeah, it was a really cool time. Viperoon was doing a hit marker thing as well, so he was on video as well. It was great fun. So yeah, lots of esports related things, lots of kind of cool games to view the next coming of talent, really. So quite exciting stuff.
Yeah, I got to, when I turned on the stream, when it immediately started, obviously, I'm biased, I'm watching it for you, obviously. Oh, yeah. Everybody else is like, cannon folder, really. But opening up, and they had the FIFA stuff, which I thought was really awesome to see, and it was just a celebration of British esports. It wasn't just League of Legends, so catch that VOD out. British, what's it?
If you go search Twitch for British Esports, one word, you'll find it. Or if you search for the British Esports Association, I'm sure the VODs will be around.
Perfect. Well, that's great. For all of our video listeners and audio listeners, if you had a keen ear out, you might have heard another voice already. That's it. It's LJL Mastermind himself, Melvinizzle. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Hello, everybody. It is great to be back, and I'm excited to talk about the, I'm going to say, neat set of games we had. I think there was a sum total of maybe 17,000 gold through this week, you could call it. Just really impressive performances one way or the other.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of putting it. How are you doing, Melvin, by the way? How are you actually doing? What have you been doing over this last week as well?
Been doing all right. I'm trying to think of what I actually have been doing. I did some miscellaneous Telia casting with Counterfeit. I believe it was yesterday. Days fly by right now. That was fun.
For the Finland series?
Finland one. Yeah, that was possibly one of the most banger games I've ever cast, of the top two teams going back and forth with a massive snowball team fight comp versus a triple reset-y spaghetti team comp. It was very fun to watch.
You love it.
I mean, that we've had a bunch of our lovely lovely casters rather come in, have done some of that stuff, but I think you're more of a staple over there, aren't you?
A few every now and again. Kind of just wherever I'm called, I go. Into the night.
I have been summoned. I mean, that's literally what happened to me last week as well. But I got summoned to the NLC on 3 hours' notice. I was madly prepping.
We haven't had a podcast, I think, since you've actually done that. So that's another thing to plug, sir. You've been incredibly busy.
Yeah, that was unexpected. That was a message saying, do you want to fill in this evening? And I was on a train at the time. So
Pretty good message to get.
I was like, yes, it was. But it was also a very stressful one. I was like, okay, I've got 3 hours to prep on a mobile phone on a train and hope everything works when I get to the other end. I think it went all right. There's some really fun games. I know Hitbrain was not best pleased because we sort of split the games. I took the first 3, he took the last 3. As far as play-by-playing and host, so we would switch between play-by-play and hosting. And I got the 3 games that were actually crazy all action, not one-sided stomps. There were some very jealous messages during those games. Hoping it picks up a little bit for Hitbrain along the line.
Oh, I mean, he got to do some really banger games last night anyway for UKL. UKL or UKLC?
UKLC would have been.
UKLC, because I know it's all on the NLC channel. Yeah. Well, I mean, LJLOU pretty much dominates and owns. Outside of me not being there, we pretty much the UKEL is just our casters at this point anyway. So I mean,
it's time.
Best talent in the UK. Like, we're right here. It's right here. Anyway, I think we should probably quickly get into what this podcast is going to be. This week, we're going to be doing a bit more headliney stuff. Melvin's going to be running through all of this podcast pretty much with us. So it should be a good fun one. But before we start getting into our headlines and everything, Melvin, for you have bathed in the waters of the Church of Aria when you joined us. That was part of initiation. You knew this. Now I must ask you, as you are on the podcast, what must I do if you are watching on YouTube?
Well, I've always wanted to do this bit of shilling, so I actually came prepared with a bit of visual stimulation.
What?
So you need to like, you need to subscribe, you need to ring that bell, and you know where you're going? You're going the LJL Officially Unofficial. Get right on over there, do all those things. If you are on the YouTubes, if you're on Twitch, you're already here. Follow, good stuff, obviously, everywhere that you can listen to us. Beyond the accursed lands, then, you know, give us 5 stars on Spotify, iTunes, and we're ready to go with a banger podcast as per usual.
We've been outdone, Lexi. Never before has someone come onto this podcast that actually prepped properly. That's amazing.
I'm so happy.
The props, the actual printer props. I am inspired.
I've had that for 3 weeks ready to go.
Well,
dear, oh dear.
Well, as Melvin has done all the shilling for us, initialized, I think we could just go straight into it.
I think anything else after that's going to be like seriously underwhelming. Like I don't want to go after that.
Oh no, by all means, no. Let's just get straight into this. So, initialize, you are producing this week. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do you have standing slide for us, or no standing slide?
I do not, but I can get one. But if we start, I can get one going in the background. So just don't talk to me too much, and I'll. All right, Melvin,
you and me, buddy. We got this. Okay. We got this for the first start. We might go into the first headline for this. Standings as they are now currently at the end of week number 3. We have got Sengoku Gaming and Burning Core tied at same place at 1 and 5, both 4 loss streaks. Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming is currently sitting alone at 5th place, 2 and 4 with 3 losses. And then we have tied 4th place of DetonatioN FocusMe and Crest Gaming Act, both 3 and 3. DFM are on that 3-win streak, whereas Crest Gaming Act went 1 and 1 this week. AXIZ continuing to just blow expectations out of the water, currently sat in 3rd on their own, 4-2, 4 wins, and then obviously tied 1st place because of that 1 loss for the Rascal Jesters, and the V3 just not letting up. 5 and 1, 1 loss for Rascal Jester, 2-win streak for V3. And I mean, the big thing really in our first headline that we're going to talk about, as it is very relevant to our standings, AXIZ, V3, and DFM going 2 and 0. I mean, Melvin, coming over to you first. For DetonatioN FocusMe, this was kind of the make or break week. Yeah, I think me and Sam talked about this last week, where if they don't, we're going to have huge question marks. They did. What do you think about them, though?
Well, this has been a weird week for looking back at the VODs. I felt like I knew more the first time I watched them than on the second rewatch, but the main takeaway I got from these DFM VODs is, fortunately, Ebby is still a monster, as per usual, was able to carry on that crocodile for a vast majority of their gaming, and frankly, as we found, CGA can still coin flip like the best of them this week, but DFM got the right side of the coin and executed well enough. I think their game against the Hawks was a bit more indicative of a stomp, with the fact that they pulled out that Shaco of all things.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So you are kind of very much a researcher, I think is fair to say, Melvin. Shaco, the fuck?
So, I was looking at this draft, and I was thinking, okay, so what on earth can they pick here? Because I've just pulled it up so I can see it now. And I was thinking, all right, well, they need something AD jungle that pairs with the AP mid, but then it's a lot of reliance on Aria's LeBlanc, which, you know, is a perfectly good place to put your reliance, in fairness, so understandable why they got away with that one. But the Shaco It's a niche pick. It's something that Steel does like. I never thought I would see the day that it was on stage, but the execution was all fine. You get a very safe early clear, and it's one of those that, as an Ivan connoisseur myself, if you do not bully a one-trick in a way that they know how you're going to do it, you will lose the game typically. For example, with Shaco, you walk in with a group of people and just clear those boxes out on the first clear, it's turbo doomed. This jungler is screwed because their whole gimmick is that they get the instant level 2 off of taking Raptors and Red at the same time, quickly clear Krugs, and as we saw in this game, got an amazing gank on bot that kind of just snowballed it from there. But if you're not ready for it, it's gone.
I mean, while I'm sort of still busy kind of fiddling away in the background, like, it also helped that, you know, like, Arya got disgusting on that LeBlanc as well. So when you've got a LeBlanc and a Shaker you're trying to go into a lot of blind jungle versus those two, like, that is really difficult. Really difficult.
A lot of free roams. Arya got that game. A lot of free roams up to top and bot. Was really allowed to kind of go where he pleases, even though he wasn't on a Mundo. We didn't see enough Mundos. Yeah, no Mundos this week.
No, we did get one.
We did. Only just the one.
We got the
it was Sengoku
strolling their way down to last place.
Let's move over to V3 Esports, gentlemen.
I love how you jumped that one real quick.
I mean, Detonation FocusMe. We'll be coming back to them.
Sure,
almost definitely. Like, we're doing a slightly different system this time around. But yeah, V3 Esports smacking. Well, actually, Sengoku's early game against V3 Esports was pretty good. I was watching back that VOD, and then the moment you just saw that V3 Esports were like, so if we just kill Paz, the rest of the team just falls apart, right? And then they just started doing that, or they just ignored Paz, and it was. They had to wait a while because base stats of Mundo was just surprisingly strong.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, and I mean, he went Divine Sundra, right? So, like, he is meant to be big boy, does good damage early mid-game. The fall-off was huge, though.
Yeah.
What do we think about V3 Esports going 2-0? Melvin, to you first.
I think for that Sengoku game in particular, if anything, I think it speaks worse to Sengoku than it did for V3's dominance in that one in particular. Because that game was, I mean, all but one. Like, Sengoku could have essentially done the most basic of strolling down mid. But at one point,
You mean Melvin? You mean a J-Ram?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And it would have worked because they were that far ahead at one point in time. But I believe it was either 4th or 5th dragon, something around that. But Ace got a flank on the Blanc onto both backline members that nobody was peeling for, forced a really scuffed position from Gango to try and move forward, which they had the right guns for as a Aphelios, but still, 2v4 after a point isn't really achievable in the setup they were in. So it was just one of those ones where Sengoku, they had all the good start, and then it just fell apart when they did one particular misstep, and V3 just have the expertise to punish it.
6th dragon that the mistake happened.
That was it. It was a long game too.
It was a long game. It was 34 minutes in when that fight happened, so it wasn't surprising that. I mean, one thing I want to say, and something I've been having concerns about, and Melvin, it'd be lovely to hear your thoughts about this, because me and Initialize did talk about this briefly, only very briefly last week. But the ability to close a game. I think V3 Esports are one of the better teams when it comes to when they understand they're in a position they can close. They're better at doing it than others. What do you think about some of the LJL teams? And also V3 Esports' ability to close?
Just taking a look at the teams overall, and I think that does resonate that V3 are one of the cleanest for recognizing how they are going to end a game, which I think is something that cannot be underestimated, because it is, frankly, it's how you win the game. Sounds dumb, but if you can't execute on this very pivotal point, then you can get all the leads you want. We saw it from Sengoku, to use that example again, but it doesn't matter, because if you can't play objective fights properly, cleanly, just set up beforehand, know when you're being flanked, because frankly, that was just a matter of Wincom recognition from Ace saying, hey, if I'm back here, they have to kind of split the fight in a really abstract way that if they're not ready for, we just win. And bada bing, it was done.
Bada bing, bada boom. Realist guys in the room. Their other game versus Burning Core was just a stomp. in my eyes. There's not a huge amount to take away outside of there is clearly a gap, and the fact that Hollow is allowed to play AP bot laners was a pretty big thing. I think it makes a lot of sense that they brought it out against Burning Core specifically, because obviously if you can't beat Burning Core doing it, you're gonna struggle here.
All right, I'm back, and I have something resembling
doing it. Any thoughts on it? Okay.
Right.
Oh, beautiful.
So, there we go. So we've got ourselves the standings as of week 3, week 3's games and what they were, and of course what's coming up next week. Unfortunately, there's a slight jankiness where my mouse is hovering over one or two of the people, but ignore that. It's fine.
You just try to rub in the Sengoku fan in me.
That was unintentionally so, but there you go.
My copium levels are at an all-time low.
Just the way that the print screen worked, that even when I was drawing with the print screen with the snipping tool, it highlighted certain things. So there you go.
Is it an all-time low or is it an all-time high? Like, are you predicting Sengoku to come back?
I think I'm gonna quickly check my predictions, not to jump around in topics. I believe that.
Yeah, we'll come to that later.
It's a rough week next week actually for them again.
Yeah. I think that they might be able to beat the Hawks, but it's not.
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah, it is close. Better said. It's not a happy decision from me. And the one thing I will say, right, is because of how those games went, they immediately, after losing to AXIZ in, I'm going to say, not the best fashion, did go on to put on a pretty damn good performance. So during that game, myself and Midnight were well on the copium because it looked pretty good. It was like Sengoku, they turned it around, they fixed it. And
again,
if anything, the most promising thing, though, is they found their mid laner. They actually tried to gank mid once or twice. It went awfully, but they tried.
Well, they've got to sort it out, I think, in the current meta, considering what champions are being played mid. Like, if they're the kind of champions if they are in a position, particularly without flash, so things like I suppose Renekton's there, Orianna, even things like Silas, right? It's the big one for Ramune. I think Orianna potentially is not so much in this space, and I'd be curious to see what you think of this one, Melvin. But wave controllers and melee mid without flash versus the kind of jungle mid duos we've got at the minute. If you are caught with your wave shove 2/3 up the lane, kind of just where the wall starts at the end of the bushes on either side of the lane. If your wave is ever caught there, just outside a tower, too far up without the flash, you are dead meat every time in a coordinated mid jungle 2v2. And so many
was dead meat on Zoe and Orianna this week. So
I mean, and even then he died the least on his team. By the way, the rest of his team.
I mean, I don't think
0 and 3, 3 and 5, 0 and 4.
I don't know if being a KDA player is really the way you spin that. I mean, Ramune probably would, but
well, yeah, but I didn't see too much of that game. But I think that's more of a team problem. But my point still stands in that actually, with the way the current meta works, if you can't play around your mid lane, at least when you need to, because waves have been in an awkward position because of whatever else has happened on the map or however the trades have gone in mid lane, then you can end up in horrible positions, and I think it's really haunting Sengoku at the minute.
So before we go on to Sengoku Gaming, any thoughts on the Ziggs bot lane from V3 Esports?
Love it.
I'm
seeing if anybody's been following any of the UK scene right now, it's all over the place. UKEL and UKLC, NLC. It's not quite made its way to LEC as much yet, I don't think, but I think it's
I know in some of the other amateur leagues they're playing it as well. Yeah, like in the Spanish league and the French league, I know I'm seeing it as well. I mean, I've not seen these games, I'm just seeing the stats and the score page, and I'm like, oh, interesting.
Oh, who beat Enclave last night?
Really like Ziggs. I think to echo Nymera a little bit, they left a note talking about how important it was, particularly for V3, because with their drafting ability, being able to flex mid and top lane, having an additional one that says we can early pick a Ziggs who's quite strong, loves the mage items update, like, that is great. You get to clear your Ludens or your Liandry's boundary much earlier, relatively speaking. The sheer snowballiness of the game means if you get ahead with Ziggs, even if it's one Rift Herald push into a Ziggs W, you've killed a tower, massive influx of gold, you can snowball that across the map. It's basically our generation of League's Caitlyn of old.
I can see what you mean by that.
I think I'll also add in, there is a massive prevalence of AD solo lanes at the minute, especially with Akali kind of being hit somewhat with a nerf bat. She was the other one that was kind of up there. Silas is still sort of there, but again, you're kind of wanting to see what ultimates you have to steal to make him really, really viable. But things like Viego, the Renekton Gnar top side even particularly. Gwen's still around a bit, but again, the point is there are a lot of AD mid laners and top laners you really want to be working with. Having the ability to bring your AP down to the bot lane and therefore have the room to draft more AD towards the top side of the map is really nice, because Ziggs, especially if he ends up being left as the only AP threat on a team, he absolutely destroys kids. He could sit in mid lane once the mid lane, normally when you sit your AD carry in mid lane, he can sit there and throw his R out to wherever a fight's happening and blow up whoever's there. It's ridiculous stuff. So I think it's going to be something that continues to see more prevalence.
It's not only that, but you get to play the ability of playing anti-dive AP champions such as Swain, which I think will become hugely important potentially if the press R meta continues going. What do you want to do? You want to play the most anti-dive champion, and you can just put all your AP damage in bot lane, maybe an off carry somewhere else. You can play Enchanter. You can do a lot of things like Karma Swain. That sounds horrible if you've got some like hyper carry in the jungle or something, or even a Shaco for fuck's sake, or a Zin. Like since out, you can do these things. And I completely agree with both of you. The draft flexibility is hugely important, and it's great to see that V3 are already starting to play with these toys and they feel comfortable enough to show it on stage. Though I'm not surprised, because we have seen this kind of stuff before from V3 Esports, specifically obviously around kind of moving around Cog and Ace in their role responsibility. We saw it a bit in spring. I think this is just the next evolution, and I'm very happy to see it. So we'll have to wait and see. The other team that we need to talk about, and you guys can obviously talk about V3 Sports more, is AXIZ. 2-0, beat Burning Core in a grueling game. Beat Sengoku
won that one.
Well, I mean, that's a whole topic in and of itself. They were like over 7.5k down at one point. The fact that they turned it around was just disgusting. And then they had a very convincing win versus Sengoku Gaming. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, that was a game. I'm never sure about this one. Nemo, is it?
Nemo. Yeah.
Okay. They absolutely clapped.
Can we go back to our faces again, please, Sam?
Oh yeah,
we can do that.
They absolutely
let's keeping the
clapped
standings
this
up while we're talking about them, but let's move them around. Absolutely. And look, we're still here and beautiful.
Continue, Melvin, by all means, please.
It was just hard bot gap, which is not something you really expect to say when Gango and ND are the ones being gapped in this lane. And as a Sengoku Copium user, it's definitely not something you want to be saying, because AXIZ played this game so well, rotated their Jinx, gave them solo tower gold multiple times, perfect recognition of how they could snowball with this pick, and it's something that I think, frankly, AXIZ have shown that they know how to play around this hyper carry of the Jinx far too well. I think later on we'll talk a bit more about her as a champ overall, but you need to be banning this away from AXIZ, because it is a style they have got down pat, frankly.
Yep.
Nemo had point and click thrush.
Yep.
Like thrush Qs. Go for it, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I just completely agree. I think this is now another Jinx win again. This one where they got to play from ahead rather than behind, and Nemo and Honey had a phenomenal game. Honestly, they had pretty good series in general. The Burning Core game was tougher. I am frustrated to all hell that Burning Core lost that one, considering how impressive some of the dragon fights were early. But there is the issue that Yuhi on Kai'Sa does get a little bit void spotty. And, they had a lot of dive champions into a team that, if you don't kill the Aphelios and you don't kill the Viego, there's a Lulu to back those two up. And if Viego gets to steal your multi-item Kai'Sa or Akali or Orianna, and the Aphelios doesn't die in the initial burst as he did very much early on in the game, because, then they can turn it around, and that's kind of what's most impressed me about AXIZ this split thus far, is their ability to actually hold on when things have gone badly in the early game, and trust to people like Hoglet and Honey to carry them out of the deficit. I think the fact that the meta has shifted more towards some junglers that you can wait to get 2 items on and then blow people up on has actually really helped them, because it's not like Hoglet is desperately trying to get an insurmountable lead by 10 minutes because he needs to, or he won't be able to affect the latter parts of the game. He can pick Viego now and feel really happy if things don't work out necessarily in the early game, because he can do it himself later on. And he's got Honey there. He can back up Honey now. So it's a bit more space for Megamin, for Inno, for Nemo, these rookies, to not have so much weight on their shoulders. So I think it's been a pretty good start thus far for them.
I really like also playing the top lane versus Rayfaki. That can definitely be a very scary lane. We've seen Rayfaki completely turn games for Burning Core when it's But Inno was able to play this Lulu, nullified a lot of the oppressive nature that Akali can have in the early game. Megamin, he was a health HP bar that Inno was just like ult the Renekton or ult the Aphelios, just make sure we don't die. Hoglet was phenomenal in this game, and their team fighting just ended up being way better than Burning Cores, which is not something I thought I would say. Like, especially like when they're 8k behind, you just like over 8k behind, you just shouldn't be able to turn those fights. They found the ways in and then just kind of death balled it, and and I completely agree. This is disappointing far more for Burning Core. Well done to AXIZ, but this is the second time we've seen AXIZ catch this ball, and it's like, okay, AXIZ can catch. If a team's going to throw, AXIZ can catch. Well, why are teams doing this?
I mean, it's also just like, you get to 35 minutes versus a team with Viego, Aphelios, and an Enchanter behind them, and you're asking for trouble. Like, you really are. Like, if somebody dies and Viego gets a reset, or Aphelios is left untouched and you don't get him in the initial dive, then it does get increasingly tricky. And the fact that Burning Core did not manage to secure Soul, couldn't close out when they had the advantage they did, and then the later that game got, they're trying to play front to back versus a better front to back team. Problematic.
Hey ho, but that does mean AXIZ were our other 2-0 weeks. So AXIZ V3 and Detonation FocusMe all go 2-0. But that also meant that the streak is now over for Rascal Jester, gentlemen. Crest Gaming Act overcame Rascal Jester in a crazy turnaround game. They came back from the largest gold lead of this week. AXIZ, I believe, was 8.5. Crest Gaming Act were able to do a bigger turn of 8.6. I mean, who's counting? Me. So, what do you guys first think of, obviously, Crest Gaming Act stopping the streak? None of us predicted this, I think. I think only our
obviously our God predictor. Like, God predictor Reed got it, I believe. Did he not?
Of course Reed did.
Yeah,
perfect predictions.
A few of our copium abusers.
No, not like this. But... Don't do us in like this. Middle.
What do you think of that match,
apparently did as well. Of course he did.
Of course. Well, he's a CGA supporter, so of course he is.
He's got problems. Moving on. So I think my eyes in general, on a holistic point, Rascal Jesters deserve to lose one game this week, because while they were able to find some good team fights, they were significantly scrappier. They were not uncontested, and certainly with their early plays, which they were in the first couple of weeks. People were actually fighting them over some of those early objectives and some of those early attempts, and even versus the Hawks, I mean, that was a bloody close game as well. Everybody was getting loads of kills and dying loads. Versus CGA, you saw the other side of that. Again, it was one of those ones where things just got a bit messy. And the game where they didn't have the scaling, where they went for the Kalista and the Jin Zhao, there was the game they lost, I think, and they were significantly less clean. Both of their games this week were over 40 minutes. And I think that was a little bit off the fact that people kind of solved them, were willing to fight them a little bit, and I wonder whether they're going to learn a lot from this week, or whether other teams are going to see this as kind of how you can take it to Rascal Jesters.
I think part of it is a lack of picking up some of those priority picks. Like, they prioritized the Xin Zhao in one of the drafts over the Gwen, which I think is something that teams have been very happy to go back and forth on, but it's one of those where you maybe need to reassess your ban priorities potentially, because the Akali, obviously a very important one, but the Lucian was another in this game that I felt like, yes, it's one of Nathan's favorite picks, but they could go on Karma and just do this and be that much of a nuisance to you. It was a sad one to watch, because I was trying to watch the VOD and try and figure out when they actually lost this game, air quotes, because it was 19-19 kills to kills, and there was only a 2.1k gold difference in a 44-minute game. This was back and forth all the way through, and Kassin, on this Olaf, there were times where I was watching, and one fight they would one-shot recap, and then Rascal Jesters would just lose. In another fight, they would Olaf ult about 30 seconds early and just get killed shortly after. So it was just a really weird one to watch, frankly.
I think that one shot that you mentioned from Milan onto recap, for whatever reason, ended up being the full nail in the coffin, and the whole side of Rascal Jesters refused to do anything. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The fact is, they went for Elder Drake into Baron, which obviously, if you haven't ordered to pick it up, that's the way you do it. But it was just such a weird game. And the moment that Recap died, personally, I almost saw the lights go out from half of the Rascal Jester unit.
Little bit. I think I'll also add that you had a Karma basically buffing up an Olaf and a Gwen who went in, and Nap absolutely tore a lot of those kids and New in the fights, which was, I mean, Gwen's strong. She got to scale. It went late. Late Gwen is scary. Especially versus that kind of team. You know, who's it going to be in front of you? Well, the Xin Zhao, who you can happily out-heal, especially when you've got the Ignite. You've got the Renekton, who, again, builds health. You've got Nautilus, who's a support and will build health and armor, not really much magic resist right now. And then the Orianna's not going to hit you outside of the Hallowed Mist. And Kalista, like, this is a hard game for Kalista as well, in some ways, because she's outranged by the Varus. Karma's going to shield whoever she starts hitting, and then she has to get into sort of quite close range versus an Olaf with Ragnarok and a Gwen. Like, it's not the easiest game for the Kalista.
5 slows for Kalista. That is rough.
Yeah. So, like, a credit to Sol for actually putting out a fair amount of work, but the problem is, once the snowball was stymied, Kalista was going to have a hard time this game, especially if you couldn't rely on Hachimetra to 1v9 these fights, because actually he's going into a lot of champions that can do him in this game. And I think Metalcott in chat also suggests, you know, Milan's pretty good on the Varus, it turns out. It's his best champion, potentially. And well, or at least, once again, we're seeing, like, this is the one he looks at least more dangerous on alongside something like the Misfortune. And this is a bit more meta. And yeah, I think it was a bit of a draft if, honestly.
I actually think Rascal Jesters punted their game plan.
Oh, yeah, they did. I think that's fair as well.
The idea of, obviously, you B1 Xin Zhao.
Sure.
And then B2, B3, you go Kalista Renekton. You should be winning by the 30-minute mark.
Yes.
If you lose, if the game goes longer than the 30-minute mark, you're probably going to lose this game. They were 8.6 ahead at 29 minutes. That's like perfect golden opportunity. You're like, how can we lose this? It should be over, right? I'm very worried that because I understand what they're doing. They picked a draft. I agree with you. Like, they got draft if because the game went so long, like, completely. Like, CGA played to their win con. Rascal Jester did not. And it's very worrying because I completely agree with the other points that you both brought up earlier. Talking about, obviously, on the opposite side, when they lost to Crest Gaming Act, obviously, this week, their game against the Hawks was just as just as bad, like, realistically. The difference is the Hawks got ahead in this game, and Rascal Jester were able to play from behind, plucky, but they also just did the TP Ziggs thing just to end the game. Felt very DFN.
I mean, like, I'll add in some nuance here. Go on, Melvin. I'll add my nuance after. Go.
Just a little thing that I noticed when I was checking the highlights. Recap. TP's into the base as Ziggs and actually flashes a G2 emote at the very end there to disrespect the Cap's attempted backdoor as Ziggs. That was just something that I couldn't stop laughing when I noticed it in the same.
Oh my god.
That's better nuance than I was going to add. I just wanted to sort of potentially start a conversation specifically around, like, obviously Lexi said, yeah, was just as bad, and I would maybe contest and say you might be right in some ways, but I think that's potentially almost too broad. And I would say what it was not clean. And that in itself is bad for your first place team. Which yes, I think is important to clarify. Because actually, you can still see the Rascal Jesters know how to team fight. Like, there is some, they can certainly lay in Sol and Secret are pretty scary when they want to get going, you know. And they've got a little bit of interest in there, you know. They can pull out the Ziggs, which is a bit unusual, you know. You know, pull out the volley barricade, which is not as common as it once used to be, say, this time last year or, you know, springtime particularly. And you could still sort of see, like, even you know, in the game where we were getting outscaled versus Crest Gaming Out, they were still capable of pulling some cards out, but it was not clean, and it was not particularly well finished either game, and it got punished really hard versus CGA, and rightly so. And that in itself is more of an issue, you know, actually. The cleanliness of the game plan, particularly towards the mid and late stages of the game and closing out, was not good from Rascal Jesters this week.
It was not at all. Melvin, have you got anything else you'd like to say about Rascal Jester's streak being over and Crest Gaming Act overtaking? Oh, stop preventing it or stopping it?
I think I'll just, again, steal a point that Nymera's left in the dock of at least it was due a CGA coin flip. Like, that was the silver lining here of you didn't lose because you got fundamentally dismantled by a team every moment of the game, and you got fully figured out. Yes, there was some of that to this game, but you still had plans in both of the games that, yes, it was a bit of a mis-execution, but you were still able to win. And I think the reason that they were able to beat the Hawks, whereas it was the other way around, is because we discussed it a moment ago, of they did have the scaling. When you have the Ziggs plus the Jinx, all Ziggs cares about is CC. They had 3 point-and-click CCs on the team. One person gets hit, they just get deleted by recap in this game. Give Sol a reset. The comp, it plays itself like a violin. It's perfect for that. And while it wasn't how they ended up ending the game, at least they had those tools in hand. So I think that I'm not too mad at Rascal Jester for this week, provided that they come back in stronger form for execution next week. It was mainly just a execution wavering against teams that they really shouldn't have that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Our next point is going to be AXIZ Burning Core, but we've already talked about AXIZ Burning Core, I feel like, to a decent extent, and we've already kind of underpinned why we think Burning Core Morph gave that away, and AXIZ were very good at catching the ball, and it's just far more disappointing from the side of Burning Core, more than the other way round. So let's we'll just gloss over that one, I think, is fair to say, unless you gentlemen have anything you want to say on that.
I'll step in briefly because I still have a small spark burning within me for this team. I really would like to see them convert some of the actual talent and ability to pull off some great plays in the early game into a cohesive win. They should realistically have beaten AXIZ from where they were at in that game. They were hitting some phenomenal 3-man shockwaves with once going in and Ray Buggy, but the later the game goes, the more nervous I get of Yuhi's ability to carry consistently. And he had a pretty good Kai'Sa game. It just wasn't enough, and it took them too long. In the game versus V3, he got absolutely rolled.
Initialize. I'm gonna just stop you here. Next week is tier list week. All right. We'll get to do our whole piece on Yuhi. Don't you worry, sir. No, but I completely agree. Yeah, it was pretty bad. He was meant to be the hyper carry. He was on a... It was like you're
the setup was there. The setup was there. Gary had some cracking shockwaves this game.
Really
like,
did.
4 in a row. Multiple
Proud was landing like 2 to 3 man stuns with Leona ults. Like, it's like, how much more do you want from this man? Like, what?
And I am aware that in my head I've not been I am pretty negatively biased against Yuhi at this point. So I'm kind of trying to work out, especially because obviously
That's what we're allowed to do on this
exactly,
podcast.
But I'm also like, I wasn't watching these games incredibly closely because obviously at the same time I was, prepping for my own casts and watching it on a mobile phone in a basement somewhere while trying to find some way to get coffee delivered to where I was. Like, that kind of thing was like, it's not as close. It's not like a close analysis of it. So I was kind of gone back and caught as much of it as I can post that. But I'm also like, okay, so I've got my own inherent, I'm not sure this guy is very good. Read that as I don't think this guy is very good. I'm aware that I saw this game and went, I feel like you could have carried pretty hard from that position. But I'm trying to work out, how much of this is me thinking this guy isn't very good and he should have been able to carry that, and how much of that is actually the truth. Dude, you should have been able to carry from that position.
Mate, the fact that Hoglet was finding spots and Megamin was finding spots just to run through the whole line and just get on top of him.
It was rough.
It was so, Megamin did his job. Like, if you want to take one thing away from this, Megamin, if you tell him to get onto Yuhi, he'll get onto Yuhi every single time as Renekton. Like, it was fucking hilarious late game, because Megamin was like, all right, Stride Breaker, GA, all right, I got Sturk's Gauge, all right, guys, I'm going to just go onto Yuhi, you do the rest of it. And Honey was like, okay. And
Some happy Croc gaming.
Like, it was
definitely happy Croc gaming.
But I mean, oh god, we could keep going. Let's not do too much on this. I feel bad for the rest of the members of Burning Core. Anyway, see, this is why we do this. We do this podcast. So, gentlemen, I have noted down a few trends in which I've been seeing. I have, yes.
Oh boy.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to discuss some of these trends. Let's first talk about specifically Sengoku Gaming and Burning Core both being on a 4-0 loss streak. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. If this happens another week in a row, Good luck in Super Week. It's gonna be a weird one. Sengoku Gaming Burning Core. Let's go over to our Sengoku Gaming copium abuser, Melvin. With the recent news report.
You need off this stuff. It's not good for you. Your predictions are
Really
tanking. Your life's in shambles.
I could, yeah. If it weren't for Sengoku, my predictions would be a lot happier than they are right now. But regardless, looking at them, unfortunately, every time they look awful in one aspect, it is always either preceded by or was just around when they did something good. It was the perfect example this week of, okay, well, they had a bad game against AXIZ. They got absolutely kind of wiped. But in the next game, it looks like they're going to win. They're beating V3. The game is like, okay, well, you can actually contest for the top of them. And then they just fail to end the game for like 15 minutes or so. And it just gets worse on worse on worse. So while this team has some signs of light, I wouldn't be surprised if they make playoffs. They are still, like, they have all the fundamental pieces there, and they can get the leads, they can execute, they are starting to remember that they have a mid laner, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's enough for them to get that high in the standings anymore, unless they disappear into the down week and then come back in Super Week completely remade. Then I think my copium's about to run out.
What about you, Initialize? Burning Core Sengoku.
Boy. Let me stick on to Sengoku briefly before I transition over to Burning.
Yeah, we don't want to spend too long on here.
Because my problem with Sengoku is basically, as always, as was true in Spring as well, they have two ways of getting ahead in an early game. One is leveling bot lane. And Gengo and NT are certainly capable of doing it. It's the tried and true Sengoku play pattern, and largely that's been relatively effective. The other thing is, of course, Crash finding great counter ganks, particularly around those side lanes. But that was what he was really good at in Spring on things like the Heck Room, compress goes, devastating charge, and just be there quicker than people were expecting and look to turn it around and call in the support. That has now proven not enough, basically, because Sengoku have also had a significant problem of basically getting a fantastic early game and then sitting on it like a dragon on their horde, saying, I don't really want to be, too risky with this. I'm going to just play it nice and safe. Just sit on this lovely pile of gold and stroke it a little bit. Maybe just sort of like treat it as if it's my firstborn child. Well, you got to throw it out the nest. Let it fly. It's 20 minutes in, you've got an 8k gold lead in your bot lane. You've destroyed everybody. You can't just sit there for 10 minutes and then expect it to be okay. It happened last split, remember, when Middlecop threw out that Q&A, what was the biggest turnaround? CGA versus this team! Because they sat there for 10 minutes and let people come to a point where they can fight them. This is a meta where people can turn around and fight you. Especially if you leave them for long enough. It's a really dangerous thing to do. And then effectively, okay, so you're great, you're good at getting early games, and then you just stall in the mid game, not doing anything, and that's problematic. And the other side is, what happens if you don't get ahead in the early game? Oh, look at what happened versus AXIZ. You get absolutely rolled. You do not know what to do from behind.
Is the analogy. The entirety of Sengoku, you could just boil it straight down to Gango's favorite champion, put him on the Draven, that's it. This entire team is fundamentally described as just a Draven team. They either get a massive lead early, and then they need to win off that, because if they don't, they're just going to get beaten up by somebody else. And if they don't get a massive lead early, might as well go next.
But at least I'd have more fun watching them if they were Draven as well. So, I mean, hey, that's just it. Sengoku Gaming, nah.
All right.
Burning Core.
Burning Core. I guess I'll continue and then leave this one on. Burning Core. There are signs of life in this team, and I feel they're going to feel a bit aggrieved by how they look in the standing. I think there have been a couple of games now where they absolutely had chances. Like versus AXIZ this week, I think they were very much in a position to win. I believe there was a decent one in week 2
Sorry, if you can't win that game, I've got bigger concerns for you.
And I kind of agree. Even like versus the Hawks in week 2 as well, they got massively ahead on the Nocturne, Viego, Galio comp, and they just didn't buy anti-healing.
Oh god, that hurt my soul.
Yeah. And this is kind of Spring Split 2020 Burning Core, where there is this ability... That's too high of a compliment. This is Summer Burning Core. Nah, it's not.
Where Yu-Gi-Oh was the only good player.
I disagree. They were there. No. At least with this one, they clearly have got Watson in a place where he can get on the champions and look kind of scary and dangerous. Ray Farkey's in a similar space, and Gagliardo and things like the Orianna, not bad. Not fantastic, but genuinely not bad. Yuhi is such a coin flip, though, and effectively, the later these games go, and the harder certain people try to carry because they're not sure they can trust their AD carry, the more problematic it gets. And when you're in a meta of things like Kalista and Aphelios and Varus and there's a champion of Jinx, there we go. All of these things are quite high priority and important to be good at. Even Ezreal, right? You need to be able to put out DPS on that champion. And I just do not trust Yuhi to do enough with the leads he has, and it's proven time and time again. This game on the Kai'Sa, he should have carried, frankly, versus I can do this. AXIZ, like they were absolutely in a position to carry that, and it just didn't happen, and that's really problematic. So, I think there's room where these guys get into playoffs, but they need to clean up their mid game, and Yuhi needs to be much more reliable.
So with Initialize saying that it's spring, Burning Core won't be making playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. So that's it. Melvin, what's your thoughts on Burning Core?
They just upset me. This team just upsets me. I'd been prefaced on Burning Core coming into the split, and you know what? Based on their first week performance, they did just enough to deceive me. They got me in, and I was like, all right, Yuhi looks kind of okay in these games. Like, I believe it was Kalista and Senna they played, something like that in the first week. It was either that or Ezreal. Yeah. And it didn't look bad, right? They obviously got a win, so it can't have been that bad, but generally speaking, they've just continued to decline, and I don't think that it's going to get better. I think it's just going to keep getting worse. The only thing they could hope for is just looking at the standings. If you just look at what the trajectories are, I don't imagine any team could drop below their current performance. Even Sengoku. That one's the last little bit of copium used up.
That's we'll get onto some of that stuff when I think we get to predictions towards the later part of the show. But I think that's fair to say. Hawks, for myself, Burning Core, I just absolutely dumpster fire. I'm looking forward to giving my predictions on that. And Sengoku Gaming, I have zero hope. I actually think this is our bottom two teams. I expect something substantial because remember, gentlemen, once we are one game for each of these teams into week 4, that second game is the halfway point. We have passed the halfway point, and I completely agree. Trajectory for both these two teams is not looking great. Maybe the Hawks and AXIZ make it out, and all of our power rankings were horrendously wrong, and we will hang our heads in shame. But we'll wait and see. Hawks, gentlemen, they're on a 3-loss streak, and I think they are the most promising out of these 3 teams. They also had a way harder week this week. One against Rascal Jester, one against Detonation FocusMe. Rascal Jester, obviously, that was a game they could have won, and the Detonation FocusMe, well, DFM look like they're reinvigorated and they've got some power and thought. Maybe brains are on. Maybe they're actually playing the game for once, as we always expected. But what are your thoughts on the Hawks? Initialize first.
I think Dash has been pretty good. Actually, I think he's in a meta where like he can definitely be scary, you know, and I think he's actually generally been pretty good. Best player on the team still. Puts out some great numbers, doing his absolute best. I think the game versus I can do this. Rascal Jesters in particular, he looked very scary on the Orianna. On top of that, I think Zenit has started being a bit more of a threat in team fights more consistently. Still not top tier because we've actually got a lot of disgustingly good AD carries in the region at the minute, but he's been good, I think. You know, maybe not great, but good. And like the only other caveat I'll add is I think Tussle has been better than Spring, but still a little bit problematic. Primarily because he's kind of the litmus test. If the game is going well, he's going to be aggressively going in. It's going to work out. If it's not going well, he's going to get picked off in his own jungle, kind of by himself. Like there's one where he's trying to be safe and he's kind of skirting around things and they still find him and pick him off. Or he'll go in and he'll be the sacrificial lamb while the rest of the team escapes. And that's just kind of the way the Hawks play is like, Tussle starts and everyone else will follow up and hope it works well. And when that's fine, it's great. And when that's not, it's not good. So you can kind of tell how a game's gone from that, I tend to find.
What about you, Melvin?
think that I definitely echo the sentiment on Dasher being the most encouraging part about this team. They impressed me so much in the first week, and then even in week 2, they had a bit more of a mixed performance, but their Aatrox game was absolutely bonkers. That was... If I've not... Like, there's solo carrying, and then there's locking in a abstract champion for your lane to bully a matchup on somebody who should be comfortable on it, and then just winning the game from there. It was honestly just a bit of a pub stomp performance. And at least in the Rascal Jester game, their Orianna was pretty damn significant. You could see that they were even flashing forward at times trying to get plays down, which you need to into a Ziggs, because they just outrange you. If you aren't the one getting something done, frankly, just looking at the comp, Diana, yes, that is your main engage, but it's kind of like what you were just talking about there, of if the games are going great and Tussle's diving in, then, it's not going to go well for you.
Going in, right? Like, they tried, it doesn't work out, so yeah, he just dies a lot, I
think that overall, I do still... this is probably where my hopium is going to start to move over to, provided that Sengoku don't just betray me and then have a massive revival next week.
Sounds about right.
But... yeah, that is really just how it goes. Of the second you least expect it, then that's when the hopium levels start to build again. But Dasher is definitely the one thing about this team that keeps me looking back to them and going, I could see it. I would be surprised if they don't make playoffs. I think that they are relatively close to I would say they're close to the ones below them than above them, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that with the exception of CGA potentially going down, I'm actually still quite fond of how AXIZ is doing, so I'm not going to predict them to go much lower than DFN, probably swapping and taking third away from them and then climbing up a bit higher. But overall, I think the Hawks are pretty set right now to finish in 5th, give or take, depending on how well CGA flip it.
I think the Hawks are a lock for 6th. I don't expect them to make it higher. I actually don't have the hope that they're going to be... I think they're going to be that team who make it in on a pretty high loss count, but they're going to have probably 2 wins over the bottom 2 teams currently of Sengoku Gaming and Burning Core. I just expect them to have like 2 to 3 wins over one of those 2 teams, and it's just going to be like, well, it just makes sense. They're probably going to win it. Their last win was also versus Burning Core in week 2, and that was a pretty good win from the side of the Hawks. It was a good game from both sides, but Burning Core continuing to have problems with their bot laner. So showing that problem and just emphasizing it even further. I have interesting thoughts on some of the players, but we will get into that in a moment, because actually, gentlemen, some of my other takeaways from this week are Karma and Nocturne have a huge presence rate compared to the rest of those other champions, and it's 92% that they have been picked or banned. And why do you think? Obviously, we've seen Nocturne for multiple different, both in jungle, top lane. We've seen him, I feel like someone's played him mid, but we've seen him at least in 2, probably 3 roles if I actually properly went and looked, and Karma has obviously been flexed top, mid, and support already. Hugely important champions in the LJL metagame, and this isn't the same for the rest of the global meta. So what are your takeaways on this, Melvin?
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with the question itself. It's the fact that these 2 are such annoying flex picks to deal with, that they're not exactly super new in the metagame. Nocturne has kind of been lurking for a while, but especially with the changes to Stridebreaker, that was a nerf to most champions that required it for the dash, such as Darius, these kind of champions that needed it to get onto your backline. Nocturne, they need no effort to get on your backline, but now, if you do draft things like the Jinx, like even the Karma, things like that can't exactly run away from you that reliably, a 99% slow is way, way better than an extra little mini dash, plus the damage went up. So Nocturne, that one makes sense considering the kind of picks we're seeing. Kalista, also quite a prevalent pick in the LJL, I would say, more so than so than around the globe, for sure.
We have a lot of very good Kalista players who want to crush bots, so it makes sense considering the players, if not necessarily the meta.
And Nocturne, Stridebreaker, crushes Kalista, literally breaks her legs. 99% slow, that ruins her attack speed.
I think the other ones that I found that was particularly interesting was the Jinx Renekton having crazy high win rates. Jinx is 6-0 currently in the LJL. Just like if she is picked, she wins. And Renekton is 8-1. That's an 89% win rate. And like that is huge. Like for Jinx, it's Honey with 3 wins, Hollow on 2 wins, Soul on 1 of those wins. And Renekton, it's Kanatu is 3-1. Megamoon is 2-0. Ebby 2-0. Arya is 1-0. So we're getting both a mix of top laners and mid laners. From Rascal Jester and DetonatioN FocusMe, not seeing much of anything else. Obviously, I'm surprised we haven't got our Renekton from Cog or Ace specifically, but outside of that, that's really the only 2 people I'm calling for a Renekton from, and that's just because they play a very autonomous one. We've seen Ace in a best of 5 play Renekton before, so interested to see what's that. What do you think about this? I mean, Jinx is the craziest one to me. 3-0, 3 of those being Honey as well. 6-0, 3 of them being for Honey.
I think a lot of that is Honey is really good at the champion. And I think Jinx is also just quite good right now. Like, if you either don't get ahead, and that's kind of okay because you hyperscale, you're quite long range. You've got AoE, you compare it with the Thresh, you've got a good combo there where you kind of go zap into Flay, zap into Hook, into Chompers, into Flay, and you kind of just CC someone to death. And like you've got some good play combos there, and you've got a global ult, all that stuff is great. And I think, but on the other hand, if you do get ahead, you can shred towers. You absolutely can shred towers. So you've kind of got a little bit of an ability to play for a very aggressive lane as well, not dissimilarly to an Aphelios, which I think has also been relatively high priority. And I think that's pretty great news if you're a Jinx player. I think it also helps that, as I said, Honey's a very good Jinx, as are a number of other people who have historically been quite good. I believe Sol used to play it back in the LCK, but don't hold me to that. I'm going off memory there, and I'm not sure that's going to be well served in this case, but that does make a pretty big deal. I think we'll continue to see Jinx plus the Aphelios right now, especially if Thresh is on the table.
Well, Nemo's Thresh is getting first round banned at the moment. Like, I'm not surprised about that, but it's like what he showed. Like, I mean, if you are Sengoku Gaming Paz specifically, you are going to remember that hook just from in the fog of war. You just saw Honey on his own, and then you see the whole thing where he gets the traps down into the Flay, into the box, and then Paz goes for the, oh my god, he jumps to his Q, and Honey has taken the lantern.
So clean.
So, oh my god, the coordination of the AXIZ bot lane is just so good, and it's terrifying. I don't know about anybody else, but like, it's great to see that they're able to do this.
Absolutely love these 2 for this week at least, and they have been, I would say they're definitely the main duos that are on an upward trend, especially given expectations for them. I mean, the fact that AXIZ, I believe they're on the 4-win streak, right? Because they lost both of their games in week 1 to V3 Rascal Jester, so the fact that they've been getting with this is great.
Yeah, the fact is they beat the Hawks, beat DFM. Like, that was just no one expected that one. And then they've gone, and then this week they beat the bottom 2. Like, they have gone, this is the expectations we're going to set with beating Hawks and DFM, and then they remain and keep those expectations going. Week 4, we'll get into our predictions in a moment, but I'm going to be very interested to see how this goes. And gentlemen, let's actually start talking about some of these top, actually, you know what? Gentlemen.
Yeah.
We've had minor adjustments because obviously we've added we're bringing back players of the week. Have you guys got any of these players that we've got in our top players so far for your players of the week for this week?
I have one. I think I have one of them, if I remember my list correctly.
I have definitely one, maybe 2.
What's this, sorry? Just double check.
On the little
top
list
players so far.
I'm good to go on that whenever, I think.
No. I'm asking, has your players of the week got any of
any overlap?
Yeah, is there any overlap? Because I don't want to be repeating the conversation now and then doing it again later.
A little bit right now.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll scrap this part. We'll come back to it later. We'll just do that. Let's actually means we get to go into our predictions for next week before our break of Super Week. This is far more important, far more interesting to talk about. Do I get to name and shame? I do get to name and shame initialize live on the podcast.
What did I do?
not putting your predictions in for week 4, sir.
Did I not? I've not done it yet. Oh boy. Whoops.
No.
Sorry,
Everybody else has, and he's the only one that hasn't done it.
Sorry.
It's like he was at a live event or
I know.
something.
I am
ladies and
so
gentlemen.
behind. I
Oh
was
dear, what can we
non-functional
do with him? Can't get the staff these days nowadays, can you? Initialize?
No.
Can't you? Just blame me.
Hey.
It's like, oh, it's just can't do it.
Where am I going to put him
Anyway,
update for the week?
This is
Come here.
expert vamping.
What we'll do-
Expert vamping.
What we'll do, I think is the best way of us doing this is we'll go along in the matches on the day, and Initialize can tell us which one he's doing. So first match of next week is going to be Crest Gaming Act versus Burning Core. Initialize, who are you going for?
I'm going for Burning Core. It's my upset.
All right. All right. Melvin, who are you going for?
I got Crest, which I think you could also argue would be an upset of the week, because every game that Crest wins feels like it's an upset one way or the other.
Yes, I have also gone Crest Gaming Act. So what? Any reason for your Burning Core go? Or are you just expecting CGA to just face down?
Basically, this is the one I've got. I think this is probably the upset that's potentially most likely to happen, though I will say the next game as well, AXIZ versus CGA, is another one where there's a potential room for a little bit of upset because of how both teams play. But my thinking is that basically with the way...
I don't want to go on to too long.
Okay, so the thing is, if Burning Core were going to do it, I think it's basically, Once and Ray Farkey have shown they can get some fairly significant leads. And CGA generally are pretty bad in the early game, give up serious deficits. And that could be very painful versus a team like Burning Core. And I think that could carry them to a win.
AXIZ, Crest Gaming Act. Melvin, who have you got?
I've got AXIZ. I feel like this is a game that... One little mini tangent. I'll summarize what I was... Oh, go on. Yeah, do
We'll do all of our predictions and I'll come back to you for this one. So you've got AXIZ. Sam, who have you got?
I've got AXIZ.
I've also got AXIZ. So I think it's safe to say you're speaking for all of us here.
All right, I think I love what they've been doing with their drafts recently, and one of the main things is recognizing the fact they play Jinx and Viego. Put this in card game terms, you've got the finisher in the form of Jinx, where if you are ahead, you can reliably end the game, because you can just get resets to the fight, you can siege, you can win objectives, all that kind of stuff. And you have Viego, who is the ultimate comeback tool in the game right now, and I think that's the reason he's getting picked so much. One thing goes wrong by the enemy team, one minor mis-execute, and that was pretty much how AXIZ came back against Burning Core this week.
Oh, wasn't that an LCS game as well last week?
Yeah, no, there were so many. Like, I think I watched Viego 1v9 4 times this week.
It was a bit nuts.
And this is why Hoglet's Viego is freaking terrifying. Actually, Ace and Hoglet both abused Viego this week, and they both went 2-0. Surprise? I think not. Melvinizzle is onto something. It's like he's a mastermind. Rascal Jester versus Burning Core. I have got Rascal Jester winning. Sam, who have you got?
Rascal Jester.
Melvin?
Yeah, I'm not going against the grain on this one. Rascal Jester.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that the second, tied best team at the moment, just from the eye test. They're just phenomenal on all roles. And if they can clean up some of their issues that we saw in this week, it should be on the up and up for them, especially against one of the worst teams currently performing in the LJL.
Yeah.
AXIZ versus Rascal Jester, and I think in our Discord we're trying to figure out if this is going to be one of our games of the week. We'll get confirmation from Chimo potentially in the chat to confirm that for us. But who have you got, gentlemen? I've got Rascal Jester for this one.
I've got Rascal Jester, but if the trajectories from last week keep going, I think this one could be a fun one.
Melvin?
I've actually put AXIZ here.
Okay.
Have you know?
Please give your reason.
I think trajectory is actually just the word for it here, because the trajectory of AXIZ is going up, and I feel like they can, if they don't get figured out in draft, i.e. Jinx gets banned, which, as much as I hate to say it, seems to be not happening. One thing I will say that lets me a little bit worried for them is Rascal Jester, I would argue, have been the best drafting, if not one of the best drafting teams, so hopefully they recognize the fact that AXIZ have a set game plan, and if Rascal Jester can figure it out, they should win. But based on last week's games, yes, their drafts were fine, but the execution wasn't there, so it still leaves me a bit wish-washy on this one, I must say.
What we're saying is ban Viego, ban Jinx, and then potentially anyone can beat an AXIZ at the moment. Because even if Nemo, and Thresh,
yes, that's it. You got the Holy Trinity.
I don't hate seeing Cog on Viego. I don't hate seeing Sol on Jinx. Just take it away from them if you don't want to ban it, or at least come in with some serious answers. Like as I said, pick the Nocturne, make Jinx's life hell. Like there are ways to make that champion hard to play.
And we've seen it from Rascal Jester, so they're the team I definitely would love to see it. All right, well, we can already tell this would be the match we might want to talk about to ad nauseum over, so it's a good candidate. Detonation FocusMe versus V3 Esports. I have gone V3 Esports. Initialize. Who have you gone?
DFM.
Okay. Chima has just confirmed that AXIZ versus Rascal Jester is going to be the one, so we're getting that sorted at the moment. Melvin, who have you gone for V3 Esports facing off against DFM?
I've also gone V3, and
okay, we'll stop.
I'm gonna
initialize. You must go as you're the minority. What's your reason?
I think that DFM looked significantly better last week in two very different games. One where they absolutely stomped it, and the other one where they had to play a little bit more macro smart against CGA and kind of punish the Baron baiting, really, and played that very, very well. I think V3 did have a good week 3, but again, it was
versus bottom tier teams.
Exactly,
so.
And in week 2, they actually struggled a bit, honestly, which was against better teams, and that still leaves me a little bit out in the cold. And I think with the way Ari is looking a bit angry right now, we've seen how that can make Ace suffer before, so I think that's my call.
Mild caveat, I would say their game versus Chris Gaming Act week 2 was very good for them. But
exactly.
I completely agree. Their game versus Rascal Jester was a complete opposite side, so yeah, I mean, that reasoning's good enough for me, Melvin. What about you?
No, I think I'm happy with the logic. This is, I think, equal in my head between the AXIZ Rascal Jester one of... There's a reason there was so much debate between which will be our match of the week, because both of these should be absolute bangers of quality game, but also very indicative for keeping how these teams will continue heading into playoffs and the second round robin.
What you're saying is we might want to put a pin in these two pivotal matchups this week. All right, that's good. That's good. Our next game is going to be our 6th game. Actually, will be Hawks versus V3 Esports. I have gone V3 Sports. Initialize. Who have you gone?
I've gone V3 as well.
Melvin, who have you gone?
I have also gone V3.
Melvin, give me the reason for V3 winning this one.
There's not enough Dasher copium in the world for this one. I feel like V3 should be able to just outdo them across the board, player for player quality. Not much I can... I want to try and think of a reason that they can win.
That's fine. I think that sums it up perfectly for me. Let's just have a quick look-see. Yes, Midnight and PP God have come... PP are the ones going for Hawks.
That's corporal right there.
That is complete corporal. I mean, if I remember rightly, our guest caster for last week, Max Formal. Thank you, Max Formal, for for coming along. Really, your casting with Midnight was fun. Great. It was just so good.
Did they get the DFM Shaco game, if I remember right, as well? They did. They were completely,
they did.
Off the wall.
It was a wild ride for them, and they are all about that corporal pride. So yes. DFM, Sengoku Gaming. Initialize. Who have you gone?
I have gone DFM for relatively
Melvin,
obvious
who have you gone?
I've also gone DFM.
I have gone. Now give me those reasons. Initialize.
Once again, mid jungle looks scary, and Sengoku Gaming, when it relies on mid jungle being able to stand up to another team's mid jungle, is just a shit show, frankly. And on the other side, they are so heavy on getting Gango and NT ahead. Trying to do that versus Utapod and Gang, you're not going to get as ahead as you'd like.
Well, let's be real. They couldn't do it versus Honey and Nemo, which going into it you wouldn't have expected. So, like, let's be real now. I feel like this might be the first time NT isn't going to could not make playoffs, which is kind of scary because he made it when it was real hard mode to make playoffs. Only top 3 teams. And to end us out, gentlemen, it's going to be the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks facing off against Sengoku Gaming. Initialize, who have you gone with?
I've gone with the Hawks.
Okay, Melvin, who have you gone with?
Feel bad saying it, but I've gone with Sengoku.
Okay, I've gone Hawks. Melvin, please take the floor.
It's my last dosage of copium. I swear, guys, I'm going to quit after this week.
That's fair. That is good enough for a reason for me. Initialize, why have you gone for the Hawks?
Once again, I think mid jungle gets a bit scary. Dash is the best player on the side of Sengoku, and on the side of Hawks, rather. Hopefully not on the side of Sengoku if you're a Hawks fan.
Well, it's the copium.
And I think on the other side as well, like for all that I have issues with Zenit in team fights, I think that's been stepping up a bit, and I actually think his laning prowess has largely been pretty good and difficult to argue against, even in Spring, where he was putting up great numbers in lane and did so versus Gango, and that's kind of proven to be happening beforehand. So again, it's like, okay, so lose con for Sengoku being a bit exposed, win con kind of in a difficult position in this game.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all of our predictions on the podcast. If you want to ever have a look at that, we do post the day of our live stream, which is going to be 10 a.m. on this Saturday. And we'll be recapping all of that with a tweet and a lovely graphic created by our in-house graphic, Chris Man, who obviously we always tag him in that because Chris is an absolute monster when it comes to his stuff. He does all of the thumbnails for this. If you go over on our YouTube channel, our thumbnail game has drastically improved. It's all thanks to them. You can find show notes and the link to their stuff down below, at least to their Twitter. Yeah, you can reach out. His DMs are open. Gentlemen, we must continue moving this podcast forward, because if we ever get stopped, we will very easily start going into a pit of just talking around all kinds of random things.
Live like a shark. Keep swimming.
It's why I just have to keep getting us going every single time. Patch 11.14 should be enabled for Super Week. Now, it's not going to be for this week, but I think it's more appropriate if I actually give our guest the spot for this, because he actually did all the research for this. So, Melvin, please take it away.
All right, so obviously this is all tentative changes, blah, 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 the PBE special. It will be going live, in theory, this week. So, like you said there, it won't be for this weekend of Pro Play, but looking at down the sum of the lists, one of the most significant ones that jump out is immediately the Akali nerfs. They're going to remove the ability to Q with that 5-point strike while they are flying through the air while Eing. This is something that people have been abusing to the highest of keys recently, hence why Akali has been permanently living in the first BAM rotation.
Yep.
Next up, we've got Karma. She's got a little bit of a nerf. It's mainly for lanes where she is bullying, so it does less for her when she's in a range versus range. It's just a little AD nerf, but when she's meant to be pushing you under tower, permanently keeping you there, that's when you're going to feel it a bit more. Next up, got Nocturne. We were talking about them earlier. They're getting the Lee Sin treatment, halving some of that wave clear that they got in the form of the passive, meaning that they don't just get to start the game with Tiamat. Pretty useful, right?
Yeah,
Next
and I mean
up,
also, like, we know that Karma is a heavy picked champion in the LJL,
Yes.
along with that Akali,
He's
right?
rotten.
So, like, get rid of it. Maybe make it so only the top players like V3 keep playing it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, who? And then I just Cog and Ace were the only two names that popped into my head outside of Arya playing anything. So, yeah. What's the next ones?
We've got Xin. This is one that is actually really big that if you haven't played him before, you may not click why. They're changing his W, that little swish stab when becomes lightning, from 12 to 8 seconds scaling down to 12 to 6. 12 to 6 to 12 to 8. Other way around, it's a nerf. So, one of the reasons this is really big is because whenever Xin does his 3 Q auto attacks, each of those reduces all of his other abilities cooldown by a second flat. Hence why, in multiple team fights, you could see him do this swish stab, give or take 3 to 5 times. Now that's going to get chopped down to more like 2, maybe 4 if it's a super extended fight.
Yeah, that's actually
And that's
quite a
also
big
just
deal.
going to affect his jungle clear, right? Initialize, I have to imagine.
A little less so, because there's a bit of time moving between camps. And of course, you win become lightning over the wall to mark dash over to keep clearing that way, right? That's kind of how he gets dodges in and out. But like the fact that basically what you used to be so obnoxious, particularly in the early game, was because actually 3 seconds off a 10-second cooldown when you're at like rank 2 or whatever is a big deal. Once you've got ability haste and, you know, and you've got down max ranked on Wind Becomes Lightning, it's less of a big deal. Hit about, 20, 25 minutes, whatever. But that early game when Jin Zhao is at his strongest, that chase down potential in particular, going to be actually quite hit. And that's where a lot of Jin Zhao's obnoxiousness has been from, is his ability to just run you down, because he can charge from such a long way away with the Audacious Charge when you've marked with the Wind Becomes Lightning and stuff. So, yeah, I think this one could be an interesting one. I still think he'll be good. I just don't know whether he'll be as busted as he was.
Okie dokie. We got any other important nerfs for us, LJL
Last
aficionados?
nerf, that's one that you may feel in the ghost of a certain player, is Ziggs is getting their early mana pool just chopped down a little bit. You know, it feels bad, but if anything, all this effectively does is means that if you bully a Ziggs early, it hurts way, way more, because now they will not be able to just TP back the lane and perma wave clear like we saw a couple times this week.
Sure, you're going to have to get your tier going a fair amount before you're going to be able to do that. It might be hurting the bot lane, so Hollow might be a little bit sad, but they can just... Well, I mean, for all the jokes we make about Syros, hilariously, he could probably be a great bot lane carry at the moment with his champion pool of Karma, Ziggs, and Heimerdinger at the moment. So, hey we'll
the
have to wait
ultimate substitute. Bring him in the bot lane. Please ban these champions. See how you feel.
Except you've got Utapon, so you never want to sub out Utapon. So
Can't break the streak.
No. Are there any buffs that we should feel notable, Melvin?
We have got Seraphine. They're getting a bit of a wave clear buff
true.
on that Q, so something that Arya potentially could be looking to bring back again with a lot of these bruisery jungles about. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, Ace as well. Someone who definitely feels in his wheelhouse. But yeah, for sure. It was one of the things that...
Asher as well.
Yeah, made these guys who are actually really strong mid laners able to play an enchanter that still has a lot of agency on them. And that's something that a lot of enchanters don't have, is like Lulu, like, kind of cool. You can polymorph at the right point and feel kind of cool about it, but it's not the carry of years past. Whereas Seraphine has got just a little bit of that kind of carry edge to them, purely because of how powerful the ultimate can be and the routes you can set up with them. So yeah, I think that could be an interesting one, especially considering how good enchanters can be in the current meta with, you know, a lot of hyper carries in and around the meta as well, and a lot of melee champions as well.
And didn't Seraphine get like a buff in like a patch 11, like 11.11?
Shield buff, if I recall, something along those lines that help with scaling.
Yeah, so like if she just keeps getting all these buffs, like she's just going to keep slowly getting better and better at all of this. And hey, I don't mind Seraphine in the meta. I actually like the game when it's played around Seraphine and Karmas and stuff. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm maybe sadistic in that way. Or maybe I just like well-played games when a team fully coordinates something. Crazy. If you press R on Karma and then everybody runs, it's hard to mess it up. But yeah, what's that? What else do I have to look forward to with some of these buffs, Melvin? What else?
All right, I'll rattle off the last few because there's only not much substance to one of them. I mean, we've got Darius getting a buff, which all I wrote down was Rayfarki Poggers.
Move on.
Yeah, go next. We've got Mundo getting sent to the jungle jail because they're getting a couple nerfs, including a passive nerf, pretty hefty one, along with just some little adjust down there. Okay. Don't know if there's been any historic LJL jungle Mundo players, but frankly, we'll have to see that one based on changes.
I believe there was one, but that was before me and Initialize came in and covered it, so I don't know their name.
All good. Last two that are left is Tahm Kench is getting late game buffs, which is really not where you want Tahm Kench to be getting buffs, because their entire thing is meant to be dominate the lane to the extent the enemy FFs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, I must say. Don't know if we'll see that coming out in top lane. If I'm not wrong, didn't Ebby play it at one point, actually?
He picked it in the 1v1 tournament All-Stars versus the Shy.
That was it.
This is the kind of guy who... This is a very much an Ebby champion where it's like, why are you playing? Because I can play a bruiser and make you never farm in your life ever again. I don't care what champion you are, I will walk at you and just fight you.
I am a little terrified that we're going to see, like, instead of sets now from Ebby every game, we're just going to see the new Tahm Kench, and I'm just going to be like, oh.
Yarr, Tahm Kench is coming for ye. He starts abyssal voyaging aggressively under tower. Like, it will happen. I can guarantee it.
I was watching like a Tahm Kench one trick that plays like challenger top lane in EU.
Is that Noam Watley, perchance? That was my old top laner.
Wait, really?
It is. It was.
Yeah, when the super duper giant truck team, I was his jungler.
Oh
jeez. I don't think it was Wheatley, though I have had the pleasure of trying to draft against that player.
It's really annoying, right? We do our best.
Yeah. Bad Beats Esports, we did not have a fun time against that. Our top laner was filling in as well, so it was rather a rough time. No, it was some like North American content creator that I was watching. But shout out to Wheatley. Hey, why not? Hey, UK scene, got to represent, support our brothers.
You know.
Okay, so I think the nerfs far more. impact the LJL than the buffs outside of the Seraphine, which will be interesting, and obviously for one player with the Darius. Cool. Gentlemen.
Yes.
We're returning. Or rather, initialize.
Yes.
Initialize.
Yes.
We're returning to one of our most contested parts of the show where we argued about everything. It was brilliant. We are bringing back players of the week, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get some music at some point. I might.
Woo.
Yeah. Okay. That was almost like I felt like. So you guys know like theme park world stuff, right? I almost just got that whole kind of theme park thing from your woo yay just then, Sam. I don't know why.
Roller Coaster
Maybe I've been
Tycoon
playing
3. That's what it is. Just I did the sound effects. If you didn't know, it was me.
Oh, okay. There we go.
I was
a young Initialize was in the booth doing it all.
Yeah.
Voice actor before his time. So how this works, ladies and gentlemen, is we go by each of the lanes, and then I'll give our overall player of the week. We will be going in sequence. And yeah, as there's 3 of us, we're going to each announce and then give our reasons. Similar to how we were doing. What were we doing earlier? Similar to how we were doing.
Predictions?
Yes, predictions. We will go in order of 1, 2, 3, and if you are in the minority, you are allowed to go first to state your case. We have got Nymera's prediction, their opinion of overall players of the week for this week, so we'll be adding those in as well. So for top lane, Initialize, who have you got?
I have none other than DFM's Ebby.
Okay. Melvin, who have you got?
I had some question mark pings because I was really struggling to think of one, and I was like, wait, yeah, Ebby, of course. So it's kind of an easy one, but I just the reveal of seeing all of these names is just funny.
I have also gotten Ebby, and Nymera has also gone Ebby, with the reasoning of 1-2 rough lanes, interesting matchup versus Cog doing things. So yeah, I mean, Ebby just seemed like the only top laner that really had it all together in both of the games.
Yep. I mean, Cog maybe was the only other guy. I was like, actually, you had a really good week as well, but I think there was less duress. There was less duress is my problem. Whereas I actually think Ebby played some quite difficult situations really well, particularly in particularly in that game versus CGA, actually. I think he solo carried a lot of that early game with some of the big gore drinker heals and stuff like around the hell and the likes. I think he played that very, very well. So, yeah, for me, it's Ebby purely, like, not that Cog played badly, but I think Ebby had a quintessential Ebby experience.
Hey-ho. Jungle players for this one. Melvin, who have you got?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I picked Hoglet.
Okay, Initialize, who have you got?
I've got Hoglet as well.
Nightmare has gone Hoglet, and I have gone Hoglet with my honourable mention that we used to do, being Hatchametcha for this week. Melvin, as we are all in agreement, please give the reason why you picked Hoglet.
Played Viego for 2 games. I can't spell when I can't read the words because I wrote Virgo, but
I saw that.
I mean, yeah,
Virgo
they pretty much saved the game off of the setup that was established by, I believe it was a Renekton Alistair. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was definitely mid Renekton. So it was just off of those 2 that gave the setup for Viego, and then Hoglet went off on one in that Burning Core game, and repeated the performance by, I'm not going to say winning the game that they played outside of that, but I believe it was Sengoku, the other game, wasn't it? One that made me sad.
It was.
Yeah. In that game, the level 3 gank really put me sad. It was synergized beautifully with the bottom lane, and it's just a really clean performance. You could see their impact the whole way through.
Yeah.
Perfect. I couldn't add any more. I'd just be gushing and repeating myself. So, I anything from you, Initialize, or same place?
Just that this is kind of quintessentially why I think AXIZ have got more of a shout in the current meta, is that you can put Hoglet on something like this and have him as a secondary carry alongside Honey. Really good week from him.
Mid laners for this week. Who did I pick? I don't actually remember. Let's find out together. I picked Ace. Of course I did. Initialize, who did you pick?
For mid lane, I went for Arya.
Interesting. Melvin, who have you picked?
I struggled to pick between Ace and Arya, so I think I put Ace first, which I'm gonna consider that as my pick then.
Okay, so honorable mention Arya.
Yeah.
Okay, and for Nymera, it was Arya with an honorable mention over to Dasha. So we don't have a reasoning for, but I'm assuming it's because Arya. So I mean, actually, Initialize, you are technically in the minority of the actual people on the podcast. So what's your reason for Arya? Weird to say.
Again, I think it was some tougher situations to play out that have given this one to me, and he was a massive part of the win versus the Hawks. 6-0-1. Him and Steel ruined Hawks' day. They were terrifying. The LeBlanc game was fantastic. And then versus Nation's LeBlanc, Arya made his life very, very difficult indeed. The shockwaves were really good to buy space and time. And that was obviously versus things like, Aphelios and Kennen and Volibear. I did a really good job of making it quite, outside of one missed shockwave where Utapon goes too far with the killer instinct, so the shockwave snaps back to Arya, which was a little bit unfortunate. Outside of that, really slick stuff from in that game as well. Some vintage Arya performance. So yeah, for me it's Arya.
Well, I personally totally see why you went for Arya. I'm not even gonna question it. Arya had a great performance this week. My issue was that Ace just got to absolutely smurf on Gadiadu on this Viego, and it played really well. And then he was actually like single-handedly just deleting Ramine. I remember when they were doing a base push, and the reason the base push just went so quickly to VE3 was because he just went over the wall in the fog of war, just like deleted Ramine, and then the whole side of Sengoku's just like,
It was 404, enemy mid laner not found.
Very much. But we all know that Ace had a great LeBlanc. The fact that we're getting the Viego, I'm really happy to. I'm going to give it for this one. I completely see, though, why you gave it to Arya, and I was tempted to. But I also gave my DFM nod, as it was, with Ebby. So,
yeah.
That's kind of how I went. Anything you'd like to add for that one, Melvin?
No, I would say actually almost identical logic for the most part. The part where Ace managed to single-handedly win the fight, I would say, around the dragon on LeBlanc in the Sengoku game. At that point, I was like, okay, well, they would have to actually run it down mid in the next game to be looking not like a player of the week for their team.
Yeah. Okay. Our bot laners, coming back to, who did I start with first? It was Initialize I started with first. Yeah. So our bot laner, who is your bot laner of the week?
I can give it to no one else but Honey, who was absolutely unreal. Has been for the whole of the summer split thus far. Beautiful stuff out of this guy.
Nymera has also gone Honey. I have also gone Honey. Melvin, who have you gone?
I think I'm going to add some honey to that honey right there.
Oh, honey on top of honeys. Initialize.
Needs to
give
find
us that reason.
The stashes. I mean, it feels like,
That's a thumbnail idea.
Almost as like there's a little bit of a historicity in here as well, because he's been so good this summer split in general, and he is so much of the reason why AXIZ are winning. His Jinx is unreal. He had an Aphelios game as well, where he was he was having a pretty tough time trying to survive and still managed to come back and be a threat anyway. He's just really good.
He is. I mean, so while I was on prepping for this, I think Melvin was actually in this, so he's going to hear it for the second time around. And I've been slowly trying to tell the staff this and see what they think of this. I don't think I've actually told this to you, Initialize. In the LJL, there is no other player, I think, that encompasses this idea of being a little bit in an awkward spot. Honey is the LJL version of Chovy. What do you think of that analogy?
Interesting.
Hmm.
Sorry, so this is... That's interesting.
Especially with how currently Honway life is looking like and everything else.
Yeah, interesting. I actually think Chovy was having a bit of a rough split, actually, up until recently as well. He was having a bit of a tough one for once. I think that would have been very true in spring, and I think potentially coming back.
It would have been, yeah.
But yeah, no, I think there's certainly parallels to be drawn. No, I quite like that.
I had to use this for Midnight and Max Formal because Formal had no idea who Honey was, and I was like, all right, Honey is basically LJL Chovy, and he just went, I think I understand what you mean. And then Midnight was like, he's not quite that. He's good, but he's not good. Melvin, what do you think about that?
I think that I would actually have to say that when you initially pitched it to me, I fully was behind the idea. But now I'd say they've actually transitioned to more of a Teddy on the falling T1.
He's going up?
I think he's going up, but equally because it's his teammates' quality. So this isn't Teddy on Jin-Air anymore.
Shit.
I see this as Teddy on T1 parallel when it didn't go perfectly for them. Because there were times when, yes, there were obvious performers. I believe there was the roster with Marta themselves, actually, and it looked stellar.
Yeah,
but
spring of that year. Yeah.
It was one of those things where they had clear weaknesses at times. That roster was very dominant, but as it went on further into the split, further into MSI, where they weren't able to get it done, to not embellish too much more on that, for AXIZ, I feel like because the rest of their team is starting to pull it together, Honey is now kind of like their fallback, as opposed to their essential, where Honey will win you the game if you give him the resources. It's just a matter of nobody else slipping up and getting him. Yeah. Exactly.
Makes it a lot easier for him to carry.
We'll wait and see how he gets on. Melvin, who have you got as your support this week?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Nema, who I typed everything in the wrong capitalization here in the little document we have.
He started with lowercase m and everything else is in caps. He's screaming at us for all of this. Initialize, who have you got for this week?
I have gone for Nemo. That's them some point-and-click hooks, ladies and gentlemen.
It was dirty.
It was very fair. Paz is going to be having nightmares on his Lee Sin of just blind hooks coming out of nowhere, and he's like, "This happened. That I got hurt at Worlds, and now Nemo's doing this to me in the LJL. What is going on?" Our resident expert went for Gang. He did good hooks, and I would agree.
Yeah, the Nautilus was actually. It was between him and Nemo, but I thought. Actually, I kind of want to. I think I want to give AXIZ a bit of a shout out this week as well. And this was a good one.
It's good to see a return to form though for Gang.
That was what I wanted to add in there. Like Gang was agreed, second, and he was like, he did look significantly more like the Gang we know.
It's kind of like we work with one another on a regular basis initially.
What a surprise!
Wild.
And it's
So who was meant to take? Oh yeah, give the full reason why Nemo deserves Player of the Week for this week because we're all in unison for this one, Melvin.
I just think that the point-and-click hooks pretty much summarize it. Their synergy with Honey this week was stellar, and I would say even in their Burning Core game that didn't look so good, Honey was getting popped in these fights, and there wasn't much they could realistically do when you were that far behind in a lot of them. But the CC they were setting up as the Alistair, I recall, to allow Hoglet to pop off with the Viego, they were buying enough space that it was allowing the resets to happen, and I think that they were by far the biggest facilitator of the week across the board.
Right. Well then, that brings us to our actual players of the week. And for me, I'm pretty sure I went with Honey. Yes, I've gone with Honey this week. Initialize, who have you gone with?
I went with Honey as well. He's just been really phenomenal. So...
He has been. He's so good. Nymera also went with Honey. With the comment, to be honest, this guy is the sole reason AXIZ have anything to play around. Interesting, as we've said a few other things about, obviously, Hoglet, and then we actually were getting a lot about Nemo. But, Melvin, who have you gone with?
I've gone for Nemo as the MVP because I feel like you can't take away all the respect that they got for this bot lane, and it goes two ways.
Please continue, because you are in the minority as well.
Again, point-and-click hooks, to avoid reiterating all of that jazz that I just went over, I think that as the facilitator, that is what lets you get to your carry, because while Honey is the person you play around, you need to be able to get to the point where Honey is able to carry. And the kind of system, I suppose, that AXIZ has put together with the, I'll use the specific picks examples here, where you have Nemo, who tries to get the game rolling, whether that be on the Thresh or on the Alistair, who works with Hoglet. These two have got a nice bit of synergy going on where they can pretty much put the game on their backs, to the point where they can just hand over all of that to Honey in the mid-game and say, alright, we've either got a lead or we have the tools to come back from a deficit. And it's just a really elegant way that they're playing the game at the moment that I had no expectation from AXIZ to be able to pull something like this together.
So initialize, we've gone with Honey.
Yeah.
Though we disagree. We see the support player, and we're like, that's great. You're facilitating me, but let me, Honey, actually carry this, right? Like, what a performance from this guy. And don't get me wrong, I do agree. Nemo was just huge. And surprisingly, right? I did not expect this from him.
Look, AD carries can 1v9 if they're given space. And Honey has done exceptionally well at carrying when he's given no room to breathe at all. When his team is down thousands of gold and he has no one to defend him, and Nemo's having a rough time and getting switched on that because it's not really working, and all of that kind of thing. And he was still putting up some insane stats. He was 600 plus DPM on the last place team in the league in spring. Like, he was like one of the top 10 AD carries for damage per minute in the world. Like, that's silly. That's absolutely dumb. And now in this series, and now in this split, rather better way of phrasing it, some of these guys are stepping up and feeling a bit more confident, a bit more cohesive, and that room to carry, that space to actually exist in and move around in, is so much better, and Honey has taken that by the reins and run with it. And even in the game where it was looking quite tough for them, and he was getting dived a lot, his Aphelios was nuts towards the later parts of that game. He did a fantastic job of finding ways to buy time to get the space he needed, and yeah, I think it's two very different sides. He beats up Gango and NT in lane, and he does the inverse when things get a bit rough versus Burning Core. Fantastic week. Fantastic split thus far.
I'm actually going to quote Melvin from his cast. I heard you been talking shit about the green gun when Honey ultimated and basically one-shot. I can't remember who he did, but I just remember hearing that, and I just burst out laughing. It was... Oh... What a game, what a player, what we've always wanted this from, I've been calling this from Honey since day one of him entering into the LJL, and I'm so pleased that he has been just turning up. Nemo is a great honorable mention though, and I completely understand why you went for it. Melvin, which does mean we are, gentlemen, at the end of the show. Now, before we do this, let's just quickly talk over a few of the top players so far that we haven't mentioned, that we would at least like to mention. One of those players was Kanatu for me. I just still think Kanatu has been having a great performance in rookie for his rookie split. I think in spring he showed a lot of potential, and it's been a little bit slower, but he's still been one of the top laners in the LJL. What are your thoughts on that, if any?
I don't really contest it. I feel like they have impressed every time we have ended up seeing them. I'm trying to just find the match history for their specific performance this week a moment.
They had a very strong performance, actually, for the side of Rascal Jesters. They were on the Renekton both times around. They kept a competitive match with Nap. They didn't die a huge amount in lane. It was more when the team fights came and Crest Gaming had kind of got more of a larger composition together. I think one thing I'm really happy to see from Kanatu is his laning is just so solid.
It's been solid. I think it was a little bit rougher versus CGA. He had a decent game versus Apperman, but I think Apperman had a bad week, actually, generally speaking. We didn't really touch on that for the Hawks, but I think Apperman looking a little exposed.
We can't talk on everything.
Yeah, well, exactly. But there are more important.
He played his role.
Yeah.
I mean, Kanatu got a solo kill on Nap in the first few minutes of the game, so he didn't play too badly. I'll
give him that. That's true. Again, a little more under prep than I would like to be.
That's right.
But yeah, I think he was good. I'm just aware that this was also a week where, we saw some really good top lane performances from the likes of Ebby and Cog, and even to an extent, Nap in terms of just scrappiness. I think Kanatu was good to find, but didn't blow me away this week.
That's fair. What about Melvin? Have you got any of the other top players you'd like to call out?
I'm trying to look, but we already talked a lot about Honey. I suppose Dash is probably the one that I prefer to take the most, and that's because they did have one absolute slapper of a game. Their game with which one was it again? I'm trying to find the matchup. Was it Rascal Jester? That was the carry
game, right?
Yeah. It was the one that looked like insurmountable odds at one point in time, and just to see how confident they were throughout the entire game really does fill me with hope for this player for the remainder of the split. If the team can band together around them, then I think they could even be to continue with the analogy of Chovy earlier, they could even start to act like a pseudo Chovy on this team, where if you give them all the resources, we know they can work with it.
Yeah. I think for me, my eyes are a little bit towards Steel, actually, who I think also had a great week. Pulls out a Shaco. Takes some balls to pull out a Shaco on a competitive stage, and then with it off some really smart early game planning. I think that Diana was actually really good as well, particularly when some of those fights in the kind of mid game were looking pretty tight. He was finding some really good angles to engage, and you know, he and Arya being on form is generally good news for DFM, because I think mid jungle at the minute is quite important to be able to unlock your side lanes. It always has been, but I think with kind of how volatile some matchups can be right now, either in the jungle or in mid, or sometimes both at the same time. When you like that's good news, and it's on champions that aren't what we were seeing at MSI, which is also good news, because that was a little bit of the lag period we've heard from like literally every other MSI team. Like, took us a while to learn all the new champions and catch up to everyone else, because we were just, there was an element of like being behind on patches, being behind on champions, and Rumble's kind of falling to the wayside a touch. Diana is coming in, and apparently Shaco might be too, because why don't you pick that champion?
No, the Shaco's not coming in, mate. No. That's just
I'm saying. It's quite good as a
Steel special. That's just a Steel special. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see some of these players. We will be doing Players of the Week routinely now on the podcast again, so we will get more player discussion, as sometimes we talk about a player and then we forget to talk about them for ages because we're just like, they're doing really good, and then we don't give them the credit. So we'll do that. We might even get Chris doing some pretty graphics if I actually get my stuff together on time. But that will be pending. Gentlemen, we are now at the end of the podcast. We do have to end it at some point. There's so much more we can still talk about, but we do have to call it here. Ladies and gentlemen that are over in the Twitch chat land, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're an audio person, Melvin, what would I like them to do?
Brace yourselves.
Well, let me brace myself. Hold on. I've got a lot of printed documents, if you can't say.
Of course he does.
All right, got it. Don't ask how it got to the bottom of the pile, but it did. I think everybody should follow us, on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Get the like going. Ring that bell. You know where you're going. LJL Officially Unofficial. You could join the Discord if you're not already a part of it. Follow us on Twitter. All these kind of things. 5 stars on all your favorite audio platforms. Done. That's it. If you do all those things, we're happy. You're happy. You get to know when the next podcast is. You get to see us do it all again and talk about our favorite league on Saturday.
And if you do comment on the YouTube, we will give you a call out as well. Top comment, blah, 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 all of that beautiful stuff. Gentlemen, at the end of the podcast, we always do questions. So let us quickly go over and see if anyone in our Discord server that you just heard from Melvinizzle that you can join.
Could join, exactly.
Link is just down below in that show notes, or if you're watching on Twitch, right down below there. Just right down there. I just realized Chimo's saying we need a sponsor from a printer company. That's I agree. No. Middlecott, who was going to potentially be on this podcast, but due to planning differences and changing of times, we weren't able to fit them on. They asked us, are AXIZ actually playing good in context of the league and not spring performance? Or is this an example of a favorable schedule artificially inflating our expectations? I'm going to come over to you, Melvin, specifically for this one, as I think you actually covered one of the AXIZ games.
I think that going off of their performance so far, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of favorable schedule, because we got to see them get beaten up by the big dogs in the first week.
Yeah. They
had to take their lumps in the form of Rascal Jester and V3, and I can't really say I committed those games to memory off the top of my head, but since then, they have had, as expected, right? So it sets that low expectation. Yeah. So there is context playing into it there, but I think in their actual performances, they are still playing well. I think that they may turn out to be a one-trick comp with that Thresh, Jinx, Viego, Holy Trinity, and if we see those get banned away in this coming week, or maybe later down the line if nobody catches on, and then they still perform, this is a legit team. If they can do it without those picks, completely legit, this team has got what it takes to fight for the top. But until we see them without, I would say they are a good team, but they may not be a great team.
Yeah. I think to add in on that, like, they're 4-2. The 2 losses are against probably 2 best teams in the league right now. They also kind of got a bit of a throw from DFM when, you know, they were down thousands of gold and managed to pull it back in the late game, and they've been able to do that a couple of times. But, you know, even if you give that one over as a kind of 50-50, that would still have been like 3-3 is at worst. I mean, the Burning Core game again got a little bit close, but the point is this team has shown that they are good at playing to stall out for late game if things don't go well in the early, and that's worth, you know, that's a positive for them, not necessarily a negative thing. Oh my days, I can't believe they won this.
I would agree. I think AXIZ are just playing well. I don't actually. So to the question, I don't think it. No, they haven't been. I think we're very comfortable saying they haven't been overly artificially inflated. They are actually looking very good. And the amount of people that predicted AXIZ to go 2-0 this week was a large amount on our personal Discord server and our own prediction sheets. And I expect, well, as we've already talked about our predictions, a lot of others are going to be joining us again coming into this week. Chimo, our admin, asks us, well, how will AXIZ do at Worlds?
Honey or crush. End of it. Moving on.
Well, they're not making Worlds, so that's the ruder response. Like, they're just not making it.
Probably not.
All right. Okay, we've got a fake question and a real question from Hina. So Hina asks us, what do you think about... Okay, so I need to do this in my news reporter voice.
This breaking news.
Breaking news coming into you live from the studio, AXIZ and Melvinizzle. What do we think about Hina recently being rumors that famous LJL translator Hina has been publicly seen with pro gamer Burning Core Yuhi holding hands?
He's better taste. Mike, drop.
That's a Pepe Nectar if I ever heard one myself.
He's got more! He's got more!
Oh my. Real question.
Sorry, Nita, that was rough.
Okay, but the real question now, I'm not even going to answer that one. We're going to just move on. I agree with the response of Elfin just going sus. But the real question now, even in the LPL, now even in the LPL, AD mid and mage bot is gaining some popularity. Do you think this will become meta? If it will affect any of the LJL teams? Well, we've already seen one of the LJL teams already playing this out. Obviously, previously mentioning Hollow playing it or playing the Ziggs in the bot lane. Initialize, I feel like we've seen another bot lane. Like, I think Utapon has done it before, right?
Utapon has done it quite well, because remember, he didn't used to be an AD carry. He's played top, he's played jungle. Like, the guy has been around long enough to play a fair number of,
every role but mid he's played.
He's done very well, exactly. He knows what he's doing around a number of champions. To add in on top of that, I think people like Gango have pulled out, like, Cassiopeia before down on the bot lane when we had a Kalista mid from Arya. Like, I think some of our better AD carries, really more confident AD carries, can certainly do, like, at least a Ziggs. The question about whether something like a High Medigo comes out is another question entirely, because that's such a weird champion that requires a lot more mastery and time in it, and it's like, how efficient is it for just the current patch to be doing this kind of thing? But yeah, I think there are going to be 1 or 2 teams that could definitely look to abuse it. I mean, Hollow's already done it as well, right? So
yeah. Melvin, what's your thoughts on this for the OJL?
I think undoubtedly in scrims, teams have to be trying things. To kind of echo the Utapon point there, if they were going to try and pick up some of these majors bot, you got somebody on the bench who could act as a personal coach on a couple of these picks right there that I think would be almost a waste to not utilize them as a resource coming into this split, especially with 2 weeks of downtime. Those mage item buffs should not be underestimated. So while I don't know necessarily if it is the optimal strategy, it's something that if teams don't try out, I think they are potentially missing a trick.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our questions. That is right, EX Kirby. Initialized with the quadra kill on myself and Melvin all in one go. That was phenomenal, honestly speaking. Gentlemen, with us being now at the end of the show, I'm going to go over to our guest first. Melvin, thank you for coming on. Have you got anything you want to say, shout out, and obviously plug all of your places?
I don't have that many places right now. I have this wall. That's the only thing I really ever get the plug. It's a great wall. Everybody loves the wall. If you want to see more of the wall, then follow me on Twitter, I suppose. That's Melvinizzle lol. I typically try and retweet when I'm about to do something. I'm really bad at it as a habit, but I'm doing my best to get a handle. Obviously, yeah, keep an eye down below, and hopefully we'll be seeing me more and more on the LJL, because it is really fun and ramping up.
It's looking great.
It is really. Initialize. We're at the end, mate.
Yeah.
Another podcast in the books. What are you doing coming over this next week?
Not a lot, honestly. I have been told to self-isolate, so that's what I'll be doing, is sitting back at home and playing some video games and staying away from people because A, the government's asked me to, and B, because I have done a lot of the busyness over the last few days. So I'm going to probably do a bit of VOD review and get myself as best prepped as I can for everything else.
I did see that you had tweeted about the World Ends With You demo for the Switch.
That will be what I'll be playing. Neo World Ends With You. The original game was my favourite game of all time, so just saying. It's a great game.
It really is. Anytime I get an opportunity to bring it up for you, I will. For myself, I think I will be finishing finally Final Fantasy XIV's main story quest. So I will finally actually be able
finally done.
After a month of playing, I'll finally be able to actually play the game, which is a weird way of phrasing that, but the story has been so good, so I'm looking forward to that. Other than that, gentlemen, next week is going to be a very special episode, as we have hinted towards. We are going to be doing tier lists. It's going to be a little bit special because guess what? We're on our break week before we get into Super Week, so we get two podcasts. One podcast is our fun podcast. The other podcast is our more serious prepping for Super Week. We might have a bunch of guests. We might even do some other live streams because we have a week off. Things are currently in the air. Plans will be sorted. But from myself, Initialize, and Melvin, thank you so much for listening and or watching, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
See ya.